With your indulgence, we're going to change the order, given the staff who are available right now, and go to 10.4, which is curbside. If that's okay, Dawn. Yeah, okay. Right, okay. All right, we'll box on then, which leads us to 10.4. Nick, Catherine, Jeremy, Catherine.
And Sam. I'll do the introductions a little bit later, but I just want to say that it feels really unusual for me to sit here and talk about anything other than car parking. So, excuse me if I stumble, but I do feel diagonally parked in a parallel universe, talking about something other than. Big topic though, so we mustn't get sort of too light-hearted here. So I just thought I'd firstly mention that you've all got a cheat sheet in front of you. This section has a public and an in-committee or public excluded component. So that one pager tells you about what you can and can't talk about, what we shouldn't talk about in the open session because of commercial sensitivities. I also just wanted to run through just a quick background so that we're all on the same page. So this presentation is the conclusion of a very long-running project, 4 years in fact, from the foundation work which started with Council's Waste Management Minimisation Plan in 2016. Its objective was and still is to minimise waste to landfill. The structure and plan for implementation of a council-run curbside collection service to achieve that objective was shaped up, consulted on and adopted in the 2018 long-term plan. The inclusion in the long-term plan clicked into gear a procurement strategy which culminated in a 2019 PSOC report, that's Project Services and Operations Committee report, and at the meeting, it endorsed that we go ahead with a registration of interest and RFP, request for proposal process. And that then initiated a sector engagement which has taken us to a point where we can present the recommendations regarding council-led curbside waste collection services, waste facility upgrades and leases, as well as litter, public bins, illegal dumping services. To add to our information and decision-making process, during the year we've also met with key stakeholders and interested parties, and we also did the Talking Trash survey, which had a tremendous uptake. Many of you councillors have also engaged and worked with the project team very closely to shape up the material that we have in front of us today. You've engaged, represented your community, and pushed us and challenged us, as in the project team, to leave no stone unturned. So those challenges were, what does it mean for Bruce, who lives on his own and doesn't generate a lot of rubbish and just put out a bag every couple of months? What does it mean for Trevor and Sally with their big garden? What does it mean for multi-unit dwellings? What does it mean for rates, which is a very important question? What does it mean for the environment? And Larry, what does it mean for the chap with the trailer who goes to Tamanga? And what does it mean to the four well-beings? And we are now at a point where we know what the costs are and what the benefits are, or the value that we get for those costs. So we do hope that it responds to all the directive and the challenges you've given us. We suggest that we have a very strong recommendation, but the answer will not be the right answer to every person in the community. And we just want to acknowledge that. On balance, it's what we put forward, and we try to balance all the objectives for the city. I also want to call out the collaborative approach with Western Bay. They've worked tirelessly with us, and in fact are a couple of weeks ahead of us in the decision making. They voted unanimously a couple of weeks ago to pick up on the council-run curbside rubbish and recycling. And just want to acknowledge Kelvin and Elsa, who are here from Western Bay, that they're reciprocating, because we were there when they made their decision and support. They, due to the commercial sensitivities, they actually decided to do it all in public excluded. It may be because we're a little bit further down the line, a little bit later in the piece, that we can include a little bit more or have some information in the open. So we have pulled as much information as possible into the public as we can, but as I said, there are two components to this. One is in public and the commercially sensitive material in the public excluded. The time pressures we have, so I'll stop talking in a minute. The time pressures we have are around Fraser, who's done the financial modelling. He's got to be out of here by 2:30 to go and join his son's wedding in the UK. So we have a short presentation to walk through, and we'll be taking questions for specific topics at the end of that presentation. And we touched on the team here briefly earlier on, but we've got Jeremy, Catherine and Sam, and Rob Goldsby at the back there, who's been heavily involved with the project too, and we've got some support staff with us. Sarah's written the report, Fraser at the back there, Genia and Kaylee. I think that's pretty much everyone that's been involved with it. So if we can then go to slide 2, just as to describe briefly the problem definition. We talked about the waste management minimisation plan, the objectives to minimise waste to landfill. Almost 70% of waste sent to landfill from curbside today could be recycled or composted. We also want to point out that the government waste levy will soon increase. We know about the first couple of those increases, and the trajectory after that we know will be upwards. We know that we need to do something different. We need to enable the community to easily divert recycling and compost away from landfill. And our analyses show that we can provide a higher level of curbside collection service at a lower cost for the average household than what is being offered today. So we have an opportunity working with Western Bay to partner with Ministry for the Environment and the CIP funding on waste infrastructure that will provide employment opportunities for the region as well. We have a willing proponent or participant, tenderer, and we have a very talented team that I outlined here before to see this through with us. And we also have a community that is telling us that they want to see this change. Yeah, so let's see where we can get to with the conversation today. Shall we hand over to you, Catherine, and the next slide? Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Afternoon, everyone. So we've obviously been here before, but I'm just going to recap on a bit of the journey that we've done so far. And as you're all aware, that TCC and Western Bay Plenty released a registration of interest in August 2019, and that was followed by an RFP, request for proposal, that was released in December, end of last year. TCC was a little bit different to Western Bay Plenty. They had already chosen their mandate, so they had already chosen that they were going to provide a pay-as-you-throw service for their community, and that it was going to comprise of recycling, glass, food waste. Ours was, we went out to the market and we asked the market for their expertise, their experience. Our goal was to minimise waste to landfill. How could we achieve this? Through innovation and knowing our WMMP of minimising waste to landfill, what was the best way of doing that? So we had offering of pay-as-you-throw, multiple bin size option, a default option. We were open to suggestions and wanted the market to come back and tell us what they believed was the best. Doing that, we also had been consulting with the community and so forth as to what a service may potentially look like. the RFP closed at the beginning of March, and then we went on the 4th of March, and then we were evaluating. Both councils had their own evaluation team, and with the evaluation scoring, 20% was for the capability to deliver, including the track record and the company's personal experience. 20% for the capacity to deliver, including key personnel, plant and machinery, and 30% for the proposed solution, including methodology, sustainability and health and safety management. And then 30% was on price. We included an independent probity auditor for the process, and he was included in the evaluation to show that we were clear and transparent and that both councils provided an even platform for all proposal suppliers that came in that responded to the RFP. Then with the evaluation team following the procurement process, COVID-19 happened, and we were hoping to deliver the service or an answer to councillors at the beginning of June this year, but COVID delayed the whole process. So we had to go back out to respondents and ask if their proposals were still valid, given that what was happening with COVID and we didn't know how long we were going to be in lockdown for. We had to also go back and confirm if their prices were valid. All suppliers came back and said that their responses were still valid and that their prices were also still valid. We had to extend the validity period. It was due to expire in September, 4th of September, and we extended it until the 4th of December. Once that was completed, we then went on to finishing the non-price attributes and then opened the price attributes. And again, both councils were independent of each other, and only at the end, once both councils had evaluated their own, did we get together to see if there were potential synergies to be had with both councils working together. So then it came down to what is the service that we're actually choosing for the respondents that came back and offered us solutions. So the 1A is the default option. So that comprised, and I've got the wheelie bins that are sitting up there, a 140 litre wheelie bin for the rubbish, and that's a fortnightly service. At the moment, we obviously have a weekly rubbish service. The 140 is on my left, that's the size of a 140 litre wheelie bin, and that would be a fortnightly rubbish collection. The mixed recycling, that is also a fortnightly collection, and that's the bin with the yellow lid. The glass collection is what we currently have, and again, that is a fortnightly collection, which we will be continuing. Then we have the food scraps bin, which is a smaller bin. We also are showing the food caddy bin, but we're not proposing that as included in the service, but we're saying if someone would like to have that bin, then they can opt in to get it. And then the other additional service that we're offering is our opt-in garden waste, which again is the size of the 240 litre. So we identify that not all households generate garden waste. So, for example, muds or people that use private gardening services and so forth, they don't generate garden waste, so they might not necessarily want to use that service. So you would have to opt in for that. Then for the second service, the 1B POT option, it's a pay-as-you-throw service. Again, we're offering it as a 140 litre wheelie bin. It's a weekly collection as opposed to a fortnightly collection, and that reflects pay-as-you-throw. Then it will be, for the other services, would be the same as the default service, with a fortnightly for mixed recycling glass, weekly for food scraps, and an opt-in garden waste service. And then the last service or combination that we're presenting to the community is the bin size selection. And again, that's a fortnightly collection for the rubbish. And you can see with the different sizes of the bins, there's an 80, a 140 and a 240. Now with the bin size selection, we're proposing that we would offer this to the community after 1 year of service. And why we've said after 1 year of service is that we've gone out to the market to see what other councils are offering, and they have found that if you introduce it at the beginning, they have found challenges, and it's easier to introduce with a new sweep of services because there's going to be a whole lot of people getting used to a food scrap service, the fortnightly rubbish. It's a change of behaviour and change of methodology that they've found that it's easier if you just keep it the status quo for the first year, and then households can come back after the first year to choose whether they want to increase or decrease their recycling or rubbish bins. And then for the glass, food scraps and green waste, that would be the same as the default. The transfer stations are also, we have included in this service. So the transfer stations, we currently have an issue with the transfer stations in that both of them were built in the 1990s, and neither of them have had significant investment since their construction. They're outdated and not fit for purpose. They pose potential health and safety issues and have not kept up with significant popular growth for the area. We've also had the closure of Jackshaw Cleanful, which places additional pressure on our resources, or waste infrastructure resources, because that's another 60,000 tonne of waste to the area, and the 2 transfer stations are the default. So the first option is we are proposing a resource recovery park at Tamanga, and with that we will be diverting 40 to 45% of the waste. We will include the targeting recovery of construction and demolition waste, which is a high area, especially that material was specifically going to Jackshaw Cleanful. That material, a lot of the material that was going into the Cleanful site was construction and demolition waste. We'll include we want to continue with the waste diversion activities that we always have, such as the recycling centre, the garden waste. We'd also like to include a community recovery centre, a community workshop for recovery, and then we'd also like to separate the domestic from the public. It's a very tight, congested area that we have at the transfer station. And then we want to have separate bays for the recovery of timber and concrete and other materials, just for making it easier to handle, less double handling of it, and making it more efficient. And we also want to have this facility will be able to cope for future growth of the area. With the introduction of a curbside recycling service, it will also reduce the traffic flow that will be at the transfer stations. At the moment, we have a participation rate for curbside recycling centres just for recycling, curbside recycling of about 48 to 50%. Other areas that have a ratepayer funded service see a service of 85 to 95%. So with a convenient, easily accessible service to everyone in the community, we're expecting to see a decrease in the volume of traffic at both of the transfer stations. The next option is to 2B, to bring it up to a minimum standard. So this will only divert 10% of the waste stream over a 2-year period. Again, we want to improve the health and safety and traffic management flow of the transfer station. We will include a community recovery centre. It won't be able to include a workshop as such, but we'll have the recycling centre, a garden waste recovery, and the separation for commercial and public users as well. And then the 2C would be to stay with the status quo, upgrading, which means we don't introduce a curbside recycling centre, we stay as what we're currently doing. This would place significant pressure of what we've currently got on them, of addressing the 2 transfer stations, because we need to do something with them, because they're, as I say, under pressure, they're not fit for purpose, and we need to spend significant infrastructure on them to grow with the city's population.
Thank you. So the next slide is just briefly touching on the consultation and engagement results. And the first one, the initiation, the Waste Management Minimisation Plan consultation from June 16, supports the intent. 2% does not support it. In favour of council-provided collections, 24%, and do not support a 4-bin system, 43%. And then the next one is about the mandate for the inclusion in the 2028 long-term plan consultation, where the community, the consultation feedback tells us that the community has sort of shifted in its understanding and wants in terms of curbside rates-funded curbside collections, pretty unequivocally. And then finally, on the right-hand side, we have the details from the Talking Trash survey, which was carried out late last year and got over 9,300 submissions, which is a pretty formidable result. And again, that's another step change in the community support for the council-run service. And that's pretty much the end of the presentation and what we wanted to put up there for you. So we can go to questions.
Thanks very much, Nick and team. Excuse me, councillors, any questions of the team? Councillor Clout, followed by Councillor Granger.
Yeah, thanks everyone for the hard work you've put in over, well, many years now actually. Was there, you talked about hopefully getting some synergies out of TCC working with Bay Plenty, Western Bay Plenty District Council. Were there in fact synergies by joining those volumes together or not actually? Because that was something that I was expecting to see. Thank you.
So that was our intention when we went out. We obviously, when we went through the procurement, we had a joint procurement team, we had a joint probity auditor and so forth like that, and we made the assumption that we would be getting synergies through the volume of material, the trucks and so forth like that. But when the final contracts that have been awarded, they're standalone. So Western Bay of Plenty are able to go along and do their thing, and TCC are able to go along and do their thing. So that while we thought that there would be, they are not reliant on each other. They can be standalone contracts.
As just supplementary to that, so Western Bay Plenty District Council, they've gone for the pay per throw option, which is, I guess is much more sort of along the lines of user pays. Can you explain how that actually works in practice? Like, is it done through the rates bill or is it done through a mechanism outside of council? Because presumably that's going to otherwise add to the admin cost. Thank you.
Yes, so Western Bay of Plenty had their chosen mandate before they went out, and how the PAYT service works is that they have a base rate, shall we say, where they have a fortnightly glass, a weekly rubbish, a fortnightly mixed recycling, and then for the rubbish, which is PAYT, you have to go and purchase a tag. So you would be purchasing that from certain supermarkets or retail outlets, and just as you do at the moment with a rubbish bag, you would go purchase that, you would put it out on your collection day with the tag. It kind of helps close the bin. There's a little attachment to the bin, and that closes the bin, and they stick it on there, and then the driver will only collect those households that have that tag on them.
Thank you. Councillor Granger, followed by Councillors Baldock and Morris.
Thank you for that. How is this eventually going in regarding the bins, the sizes, the choices, and of course the options? How's this going to be presented to the community? And why I ask this is simply, I hopefully can say it's going to be quite simple for them to understand. It's not too much gobbledygook. Have you ideas on what you intend to do and how you're going to do that?
So depending on your decision, whenever that may be, will be depending on how we communicate that comms to the community. So for example, if we end up doing a default option, everyone will be having the same bin, everyone will be having the same service, so the communication would be quite easy with that. If it's a PAYT, there would still be that base rate, again, but informing the community that you'd have to be purchasing a tag in the nearest retail outlet, and we'd be doing the comms around that. And the same with the multiple bin option, we'd be doing the base rate, we'd be saying that at the first year, and in the second year we'd be saying you can choose a 80, 140 or 240 litre wheelie bin for your rubbish or recycling.
Going to be eventually, like I'm looking for, is this going to be eventually done by the likes of flyers or something that are sent out to the public or to the community for them to understand, or how are we going to look at doing that?
So I'd probably get one of our comms team, but yes, they'd be doing all of that. There would be a massive engagement with the community of the comms so that they understand. There'll be apps, there'll be a website, you'll be able to call in. We'll have a calendar just like we do with the glass truck of what the service would look like. We would be holding the community's hand to make sure that it's a customer-centric outcome so that they don't have any observations of what goes in what bin, what day the service is or anything like that. They need to be aware of it so that they understand what's going on.
Sorry, if I can just add to that, and that's one of the reasons why that the first option was not to have those bins rolled out at the start, because for some people I can imagine that having all of those options available and suddenly having to change the contractor that you're using, and all of those would be a little bit too much to get your head around, especially for new bins, that if we rolled that out after a year, people would have a better grasp on what the bins look like and the different sizes, and actually I hardly ever use my bin, so next year I'll get a smaller one, or I use it too often and have to go to the station, so I'll get a new one. So we're trying to simplify that as much as possible.
As long as we can give them all the support that they need, because like you say, it's going to be a big thing for them, not only ours, but it's just that sometimes you've got to lead them by the hand and certainly tell them what they need.
Yeah, we definitely want people to feel supported in this change.
Thank you, Sam. Councillors Bullock, Morris, Hughes and Arbery in that order. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Temby. Catherine, when Margaret Murray-Benz was in this morning and she said she gave a figure of $150 was going to be cheaper for her, is that their system with the addition of PAYT? And can you just elaborate on that?
So Western Bay have plenty of, as you were, chosen the PAYT. So when she mentioned a price range of 140 to 150, that's yet to be clarified yet what that specific rate is. That is their base rate. So that will include a fortnightly glass, mixed recycling and a weekly rubbish service. Then they will have their PAYT with the wheelie bin with a tag on top of it, where households will have to go and purchase a tag for $3.95 per household, so that will be an additional cost. So that base rate will be between 140 and 150. Then they'll have to pay for the rubbish on top of that, and that will be approximately per household about $107. So you would add the 140 or 150 to the 107.
So they have a weekly rubbish service,
Correct.
but they have to buy a tag every week.
Correct.
So there's possibly 50
Correct.
times $4 or whatever.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So, point of order, sorry. Just wondering, there's a few things on here on our cheat sheet that we're not supposed to talk about. Just checking we're not crossing those boundaries.
No, I don't think we have, but it's a good point you raise, Yako. Thank you. Councillors Morris, Councillor Morris.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Just in terms of option 1B, the pay-as-you-throw option, which our cousins across the boundary have adopted, but may not be a recommendation in our case, can we utilise RFID technology to bill, rather than having the imposition of people going out and having to purchase? Can we bill like we do with water rates, because of course they use the water and then we bill them afterwards? Can we do billing?
So that was a key part when we went out. If you ask what is the best and most fair and transparent, it's pay by weight as opposed to pay by tag. So that was a key part when we went out in the tender process to see what services could be delivered and RFID technology. So we would like to future-proof the service, because that when we're proposing a PAYT option at the moment, it is with a tag, because the technology is not there at the moment to support the RFID technology. It's not, doesn't capture every bin, it doesn't capture every weight. I do believe it will happen in time, but what we're wanting to do at the moment is to future-proof the service. We would like to implement an RFID chip into the bin, so when it does come online, we'll be able to introduce that to the community.
Supplementary question? I've just looked at other municipalities around the world, and they're able to do just that, billing with the RFID tag or chip or whatever. So we can't do that? Why can't we do that? Why can't the provider assist us in billing people, regardless of weight? When you put it out, you get billed. If you keep it in, you don't. Are the providers not able to do that?
So in the response, we didn't have a provider that we were confident with that would be able to apply that. The providers that are providing it, are pay by weight, are doing it on a commercial scale, so a much more smaller database, 1,000, maybe a maximum of 5,000. But when you're talking 58,000 households, they couldn't apply the same principles. And I suppose, without being awful, we didn't necessarily want to be a guinea pig. We love the idea in theory and how it works, but we just didn't believe the technology was there to do it, so hence we wanted to future-proof the service as opposed to rolling it out straight away.
Supplementary, please.
Sure.
Just to build on that, so have you discussed with the chosen provider? Have you discussed the the opportunity for that in the future and what that might look like and whether they're open to that?
Yes, that's come into the conversation, absolutely. So future-proofing the service, and it wouldn't just be for that, but for any changes that may happen with being led by central government or anything, we need to be able to future-proof a service for whatever may come out. But yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Moving on to Councillors Arbery, followed by Hollis. Thank you.
So there is an RFID tag that will be in each bin.
Yes, that's what we're proposing, yes.
Okay, no,
Yep.
sorry. And in terms of the contract, just wanted to confirm that living wages is part of that contract?
That's a standard requirement, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Hollis.
Thank you. With the removal of the landfill across the Kaimais, for example, what incentives and penalties are going to be put in place so that we can guarantee that it's being reduced and not used in a different one? I'm just tiptoeing all around this piece of paper, by the way, so that we can guarantee that waste is reduced and there is an incentive to make sure that happens. Is there anything like that in the contract?
So we've got targets in the contract where we're seeing diversion, and we're specifically, to give you a rough idea, we send approximately 200 kgs per capita per house in Tauranga. We want to reduce that. Ideally, we'd like to see half of that, and we've got targets in place to do that, so we're doing that, including it, but we can't achieve that without introducing a full sweep of services that is easy and convenient to all of the community. That's what we've found where we're restricted by. So we do have those provisions, and we also have it specifically around the transfer station as well, identifying the construction and demolition waste, those other concrete or wood waste recovery, the organic, the green waste. Those as well are included in the contract, yes.
So sorry, but what are the penalties? Is there penalties if they go past those?
We've got penalties, so there are service specifications in the contract, and we've got specific penalties around those of not meeting those. So one of the standard requirements is to meet that 40 to 45% target reduction in waste and landfill, and it's within the first 2 years, and there's penalties if they do not meet those targets.
When the blue bins came out, they were about $22. They're now $38. What mechanisms are in place to prevent that 250 or whatever it's going to start at blowing out to over 400 in 2 years?
So with the glass, curbside glass collection service, when it was rolled out, it was for a 9-month service. So it was a $26. Please don't quote me on the figures. I haven't got them right in front of me, but $26, and that was for 9 months. If it was for 12 months, it would have been $34, and then it's gone up to, I can't remember the exact figures, but 30. Yeah, and then it's gone up incrementally, subject to CPI adjustments. With this contract here, what we're proposing is that the curbside collection contract would be for 8 years plus 2 years, but the facilities and the processing of the material, they're actually for a 16 plus 2 plus 2. So the gate rate, so to speak, or the processing rate that we get now, we will be locking that in for 16 years plus 2 plus 2. And then they'll be subject to CPI adjustments and so forth.
Thanks, Catherine.
Sorry, can I just ask a supplementary on that one? And those prices take into account the increase in landfill charges?
Yes, so we've got the landfill, the waste levy specifically, and then the emission trading scheme. So next year from July 2021, the waste levy at the moment is $10 a tonne. It'll increase to $30, and then by July 2024, it'll be up to $60. So in the modelling that we've done, we've included that.
I can add maybe to just in terms of the costs or potential increases in cost for the term contract. The term contracts are not unusual to us, so we run them for our road maintenance and operations contract, for instance, and the Three Waters operations contract. And those have clauses included for spikes, for instance, and indices and that sort of thing. So it's standard contractual arrangements that we apply to this contract as well.
Catherine, just a bit of a supplementary to Councillor Hollis's questions. Just looking at the slide that you had up 3 or 4 ago, I mean, it showed that 35% goes to landfill, the other 65, and then round figures, 65% can be is divided between compostable and recyclable. I mean, that's obviously the aim, right? If that's the case, we would be looking for no more than 35.1% to be going to landfill. I imagine that's where we're heading with this as a goal.
That's right. So this is, I suppose, a key piece of information because it shows what we're trying to achieve, what we're trying to divert, and at the moment it's not happening, and for various reasons we want to make the service convenient, accessible to everyone in the community, and our research shows, and what other councils have been able to achieve, if you have a ratepayer funded service where it's easy and accessible to everyone, then you're able to meet those targets and goals.
Right, and what you're also saying is without having the capability delivered through these and the glass recycling bin, that can't happen.
Correct. So with the glass service, it's been very successful when that was introduced. We've seen a great participation rate, and we're one of the and it's continued to grow throughout. So that service was introduced in October 2018, and it has only gone from strength to strength and seeing the recovery. Over 6,000 tonnes of waste has been diverted from landfill. When that service was stopped by the private sector, all that material would have ended up in landfill, and also when that material was stopped by the private contractor, that material, there was not a decrease in the cost for the service.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hughes.
There's been some talk about the fact that some local jobs, etc., might be lost through this. When we're diverting and creating a resource recovery centre, do you know how many jobs we actually are creating?
We have for specific ones, and I'd probably lead on to that into that second part of the conversation. But yes, we've got a breakdown of job analysis of what that will be doing. So, and generally speaking, that at the moment when we're supporting a landfill, it's a linear approach because waste goes to landfill. You haven't got that recovery. If you've got a circular approach, you're creating more jobs not only through the collections, but the processing of the material, the end markets. So it's a bigger bigger job creation than opposed to the linear approach.
And again, Catherine, would we be correct in assuming that some of the staff that are working in this for other contractors would probably be employed by whoever wins the tender?
Correct. So they will be like anyone going out. They would want there's a certain skills requirement needed, and if there's people out there already in the community that have those skills and experiences, I don't want to put words in the contractor's mouth, but they have already expressed that they would be keen to retain and employ those.
Councillor Hollis.
I'm torn about whether I'm concerned about a 16-year contract being awarded prior to us knowing how it's going to operate and how the operators and things are going to operate. Is there any way to break that 16 down so that if things go bad with that relationship, we're not left with a big bill to pay them to get out?
So there are clauses in the contract if things do go bad, if they don't meet their KPIs and so forth. That's part of the negotiations, but there are clauses in the contract. But councils normally have those long-term contracts because the investment and the infrastructure that is required for those contracts, as you can see, are quite expensive. So they are able to provide a competitive price because of the length of the contract.
So, and we got strong legal advice on that, and there was no other options available.
So we're just finalising the negotiations at the moment. We have an external party, Simpson Grierson, who have provided legal advice to council, and the negotiations are ongoing.
Thank you. Councillors. Councillor Robson.
One or two, if I may. In terms of KPIs, according to the Key Research Survey 2017, the current process had something like 93% satisfaction, very satisfied. Is there a resident satisfaction KPI in the contract? In other words, are we effectively, in terms of measuring the satisfaction of our residents, are we targeting better than the 93% the public sector put in?
So there's KPIs in the contract, and I would have to go back to reference them to say what they specifically are, but they're customer-centric focused. We don't want to be having someone ringing up that their bin's always missed, that they have had animal strikes, or we definitely, this would be a huge change to the community. We're going to have a bin auditor as such out there. We need to hold the community's hand because we want to create that behaviour change. So that's a key part in the service that we're offering to the community.
So perhaps someone could answer at some point in the next half an hour or so whether there's actually a customer satisfaction KPI
Jeremy, are you able
contract.
to comment on this?
No, because I've not been part of a tender evaluation panel, so I haven't seen the contract terms. So no, I can't. Sorry.
So, but I mean, that maybe needed to be answered because of the two elements to this discussion. It would be helpful for me if that question could be answered, because I think it's quite critical if we're talking about serving our community. I know there's the bigger issue as well. What risk does council face with this contract with regard to changes in the operating environment? I didn't see a sort of detailed risk. I saw some scenarios explored, but I didn't see a significant risk analysis. So, for instance, if there was a nationwide container deposit scheme introduced in the next 2 or 3 years, and there bloody well should be, so what level of risk analysis has been done in terms of certain obviously foreseeable and perhaps those less foreseeable events?
So specifically speaking to the container deposit or container return scheme, that is something that central government are very much discussing now at the moment. And that would affect our curbside recycling bins, so the 240 litre wheelie bins. So in the contract we have options obviously for variations, because there are things that are out of our control, such as something like that coming from central government, but also what is going into the 240 litre mixed recycling bin is your paper and cardboard, tin cans, aluminium cans, and not everyone would use the container return scheme. So if we saw a significant reduction in the amount of people that were putting the mixed recycling bin out for a fortnightly, it may be something that we would have to introduce as to a 3-weekly collection as opposed to a fortnightly. At the moment it's probably hard to say that, but we have variations in the contract that we can address those issues that are being led from central government.
Just to
Thank you.
Just to follow on from that one, during a challenge session yesterday we had as an internal team, we took brief modelling, and Fraser did the work, of a scenario where you still did all the collection, you still did all the processing, but all the end markets disappeared, so there was no revenue, and all those products which you would have had an end market for ended up going to landfill to increase your landfill costs, and the modelling showed that it was about, well, it was less than $20 per property per year. So that would be the consequence. And at the moment, the numbers already include a contingency figure, which pretty much covers that. So
Sorry.
that downside risk is not that high.
Supplementary, if I may, when did you do that challenge team protest? When did
We've been challenging ourselves for
I
the
understand
last...
that, but you made
That
specific
conversation was
allusion to-
yesterday, and Fraser has run the
That
numbers yesterday
conversation was yesterday. Just noting that. Thank
Yep.
you for that. Another question, on page 136, paragraph 80, you've got some movement in participation rates expected, hopefully. Can I ask 2 questions in regard to this? Are those movements, do they fit the sort of 95% certainty profile we're looking for now in terms of our decision making? In other words, are we 95% confident we'll get that sort of movement, or are they ranges and actually I should be looking at the midpoint for 50% confidence? Can I just ask that question?
So what we've modelled those on, and where we've seen other councils, if you have a full sweep of services, we're at the higher range of those percentage participation rates, whereas if you're only choosing section of it, it will reflect what that section, if you only chose one of them as opposed to a combination, it might mean a reduction. So for example, when we're proposing a fortnightly rubbish service as opposed to a weekly service of rubbish, the food waste bin may not be used as often because it's hard to change that habit, because you've already got a habit of putting out your rubbish weekly, and you want to get rid of the smelly stuff, and you just think, oh, I won't use the food bin. So we want to, this is part of the part where we want to educate the community and change that behaviour. So even though we're saying how we're going to change it to a fortnightly collection, there is an incentive or motivation so that they use the food waste bin as opposed to just having another bin.
Thank you, and you now won the prize today for answering the next question before I'd asked it, which is, no, that's wonderful, because I was going to ask the question, given the number of trials on the old food collection thing, typically running at about 50%, you look optimistic, but you'd explain why you're optimistic on that, and I appreciate that. But back to glass on that table, this is a process that, in your own words, is going great. It's a great example, tremendous take-up, yet it already exists. Do you really think we'll move from 65% to 80 to 90%? You know, what's the rationale for that? Because it seems like a big leap given we've had this process in place for a while.
So the big leap in that is that at the moment we currently have a curbside recycling service for mixed recyclables, and about 48 to 50% of the community use that by the private sector. The rest of the community use the transfer station. So people have made a proactive choice to say, I don't want to be using that, I want to go to the transfer station. Since they're already going to the transfer station, a lot of the community continue to use the glass as a drop-off point when they're dropping off their paper.
Guilty as charged, I apologise.
Okay, so what we're saying is if we provide a sweep of service that's convenient to everyone, that should increase and reduce the glass that's going at the transfer station, which will help deload those transfer stations, which are very heavy with traffic, because all of a sudden you won't have to drive there to get rid of the material, you'll be able to put it out at your curbside.
And I suppose my last question, slightly tongue-in-cheek, I didn't see a factor in for reduction in CO2 emissions in the proposal, a significant, accurate working of CO2 reductions.
So with the CO2, it's hard to be able to determine what the current CO2 footprint is because we don't know what the make of the trucks are that are driving around. We don't know when they're manufactured. We don't know the diesel consumption or anything like that. We're able to do some modelling of what a new contract would look like. We also know that with a new contract it would just be one provider driving down, as opposed to at the moment we have, obviously for rubbish and recycling, 5 providers driving down the street. We don't know the areas that they're covering for all of it. We do know that with a new provider there's 530 kilometres that is covered of road network in Tauranga. There's quite a bit of variables. So we would be able to do some modelling, but it would be some assumptions, but I would be able to give you the definitive answer of what a carbon footprint would look like on a new service.
When I think about CO2, I think about the entire system. So can we please also look at the CO2 reductions you'll get, because idiots like me won't drive to the transfer station on a regular basis, right? That needs to be factored into that equation. Thank you, that was impressive.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to move this from the chair unless there's other questions. Councillor Hughes.
With price, I suppose, I don't know what the price would be. At this stage, it's a case of future-proofing the service, and if the technology did come out and could provide the service to scale and it was really good, I suppose then it would be a case of going back, presenting to you, these are our findings, would you like to introduce it? What are your thoughts? These are the costs, this is the current cost, and going from there, and you might say, oh, it might come down in a couple of years, we'll introduce in a couple, I don't know, I guess I would be guessing.
Oh, so I was thinking it would be a cost on the provider. So there's the provider themselves wouldn't be a handbrake to us making a decision to move forward as we're coming.
It would be a variation to the contract, yes.
Catherine, just a question of clarification. Are we doing anything different to what every other metro has done so far?
As far as curbside? No.
As far as this.
No.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baldock. Are there any other questions, councillors? Councillor Arbery. Indeed, I was just about to clarify that. I was going to clarify that, so I'm moving at the moment A, B, and over the sheet, if it's the same as mine, I, which is considers options in relation to curbside, recognises the consultation since 2016, and resolves that the decisions made in confidential when we get there around this preferred supplier and so forth.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, thank you very much on the screen. Yeah, and I is across the, somewhere else. Oh, it's there, thank you. We can take them in parts, of course. So, can I just say firstly, I just wanted to thank Nick, you and your team, all of you for all the work that's gone into this. It's obviously happened during the term of the last council, and it's been, I imagine, reasonably exhaustive, and the results have only got more, as you quite rightly said, Nick, more clarified that there was, more lucid around the clarification of the need for curbside recycling and rubbish collection of this level, and as I think we know, we are, as a metro, well behind the others, and it's just great to see that we've got the opportunity to do something a lot better. And if we can get anywhere close to 35% in landfill, which is to say recovery of the other 65%, Catherine, that would just be fantastic. So congratulations to you all. Councillor Baldock. Councillor Arbery.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame so much of this is in the confidential section. I think the only real question here is whether to consult with the community or not. Looking at all the information, this to me is a really obvious decision. This is a lot more affordable, a lot cheaper. It unlocks a lot of value of our ratepayers. So I did a rough calculation, and over the next 10 years, our ratepayers will have an extra, and to avoid giving away information, an extra $100 to $200 million in their back pocket over 10 years. So this, and that's a really good stimulus to the local economy if that money can be spent on what the ratepayers want it to be spent on. So, I guess I'm really talking about motion C through to H, but I think this is a good example of if you restructure a market to make it more efficient, you can get better value for the consumers. On the point of consultation, I think if particularly the people who've been emailing us, if they had all the information we had, I'd think they'd understand that we should be getting on with this as soon as possible. That's my personal view, and that they'd appreciate that we didn't re-engage and ask those same questions as we did in the 2018 LTP.
Thank you very much, Councillor Arbery. Councillors, Councillor Robson.
I was a little bit confused of what was being spoken to. I understand we've got A, B and I, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
And open.
And in relation to that, I'm more than happy, and I understand we're taking in parts, more than happy to support A. And look, the staff have been impressive here. On B, less certain about this, and we've been in this situation before where, depending on a future decision, it may beg a question about what's happened before. So I will abstain on B, and I will support I. So thank you for allowing us to take part. So I will support A, I will abstain on B, and I will support I.
Thank you, Councillor Hollis.
Yeah, I think A is pretty straightforward. B, for me, based on the smattering of emails that we received recently, but also the angst that I'm feeling in the community about this, that still hasn't been addressed. There is still a lot of upset people out there, and I think that we do need to talk to them more before we go ahead and charge them this sort of rate. I also feel that it rewards wasters and penalises those that are keen. I mean, it's 28% of the population was below this amount that we've come up with so far. And those people are likely to be our elderly and our ones most affected by an increase. So anyway, I think we need to consult more, and I'll support I.
Thank you very much. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor. And I've supported this proposal all the way from day one. That being said, I think that pay as you throw is the way to go for Tauranga City Council, and that is referred to in more detail and confidential. However, it is easy enough to say that a pay as you throw model will reduce the cost for our low waste users, and those are the ones, the people who use the black bags and put them out once a month, or for particularly waste retentive people, once every 6 months or what have you. So I think pay as you throw is critical, and when we discuss that in confidential, I'll be supporting that particular option. In terms of B, I don't support B as is written, and the reason for that is that over the last it was really 2 years ago when Council engaged to the fullest extent on this with an open mind, and that was through the long-term plan. And that, of course, in a long-term plan you have multiple proposals on different things. We had a rating review, differential, UAGC, and issues around the civic precinct and the museum. It was quite a big document. And so that was 2 years ago. The costs were uncertain. The level of service was uncertain. Right now, respecting confidentiality, we have more certainty for both, much more certainty. So it wouldn't hurt to check in with the community again on this. I don't think that engagement with the community is something we need to be afraid of. I think that actually many of us around this table signed the Community Engagement Charter, and I, for one, I keep my promises, and so I'll be supporting consulting on this for a limited time with our community.
Councillor Hughes. And Councillor Cloud, thank you.
Yeah, I support this. I'm really looking forward to all of the opportunities we'll have to develop a more circular economy and to look at our food waste in a way that contributes to better outcomes. I also am very interested in pay by weight, and I think that this, and I really understand the pay by throw thing of going and getting a ticket and buying it every time and attaching it to your bin just seems a bit old school. I think there's technology that's coming that's going to be really ready for us to do a really good solution around this. So whether or not it's possible to put in some kind of within 2 years clause to go for pay by weight, and I don't know whether that is a possibility, but that could be an option, or otherwise we wait. But either way, I'm really happy with the work that's been done, and I'm really happy to support this going forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cloud.
Thanks very much. I think it's well known that Tauranga City has a very low recycling rate compared to other cities, purely because of the process that we go through and the regime we have for rubbish and recycling in the private sector. And I think it's been well canvassed the fact that 5 or 6 trucks going down your road on rubbish day is very inefficient, not to say also bad for our carbon emissions. So the other very important factor that people are wanting to know is, how much is this costing us? And because we are in the open, we cannot at this stage divulge what those figures actually are. But just doing a quick few calculations and looking at the graph that's in our actual page in our paper, it looks like around about 70% of households will be paying less under this council arranged regime. So I think that's actually a really good thing. I just have one quick question, but when it comes to B, in terms of consultation, can someone in the staff just give us a very quick heads up as to the implications of delaying the implementation of this, given that we may have 2 or 3 months worth of consultation? If someone can quickly outline those impacts. Thank you.
Yeah. Through the chair, I'll answer that. Perhaps we can have that conversation in non-public. It may actually be of benefit to have the non-public part of this meeting and then perhaps bring B back, depending where the decision lands in non-public. It's just a suggestion. Potentially this matter could just lay on the table until after the non-public, then council would actually know what their decision was and what, if anything, was required to be consulted on, if at all.
Thank you, Chief Executive, and I actually agree with that approach, because right now I would be inclined to take it back to the public for their consultation, but until we know what the actual outcome is for the rest of it, I'd like to see that delayed.
Just for clarity, I'm happy to leave B sitting on the table, having proposed it, if this would facilitate a discussion during the non-public component. Do we need to set? Thank you, Larry. Thank you very much. Do we need to put that to the vote, to leave it on the table? All those in favour that it lays on the table, please say aye. Against, abstentions, and carried. I think there was one more person wanted to speak on this. No? Okay. All right. In that case, in parts, putting to you A, which you can read yourselves. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, abstentions, and carried. And I resolves that the decisions made in confidential. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, abstentions, and carried. Thank you very much. Which now moves us back to public excluded. Thank you very much. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you, Kelvin. Against, abstentions, carried. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Can we just go that? Can we please put that vote for public excluded?
Public excluded. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? Thank you, Councillor Robson and Councillor Hollis. Any abstentions? Carried. We are now in public excluded. Thank you very much.